Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Let's start with the conversations about the Plantation Industries and Commodities Minister, Datuk Khairuddin Ahmad Razali's quarantine violation after returning from Turkey in June. Now, it was raised in Parliament today, during which the Dewan Rakyat was told that there are no double standards when it comes to enforcement of COVID-19 SOPs. Amanah MP for Pokok Senar, Datuk Mahfuz Omar, he had questioned the differences in the sentences meted out to those in power and those not in power, which Mahfuz said was similar to the P. Ramlee film Antara Dua Darjat. Did you watch that film, Sharaad?
No, I must say it's one of the classics that, of P. Ramlee that I haven't watched, but I am catching up on much of P. Ramlee through the memes, the many memes, Melisa, that have been produced, and not just over this issue, but in other issues, with P. Ramlee capturing the nature of Malayan society, you know, class differences, feudal attitudes. Of course, I think the connection with this issue of double standards,
right,
that sort of nailed it.
And it seems to be a recurring theme during the MCO. I mean, if you compare to the Makcik Gelang Pink, we all know that she was fined 8,000 ringgit, sentenced to a day in jail after violating her home quarantine order. There was a man in Penang who was fined 2,500 ringgit for the same offence. Khairuddin was given a compound of 1,000 ringgit, to which the Ministry of Health has said that they're standing by that compound, that amount, and they're saying they've closed the case on this matter. They are now turning it over to the enforcement agencies. Yeah,
you know, the agencies and these institutions are all, of course, being dragged into this vortex of, I think, frustration and unease about how the differences in sentencing and, in fact, in enforcement, and it does affect their integrity, right? So the ability for them to impose social discipline and to lead from a kind of moral standpoint.
You mean the Ministry of Health? The Ministry of
Health.
They've done a wonderful job, right?
And the police as well. So, you know, I think all of them suffer when they are seen to be complicit in double standards, in selective prosecution, or any of those charges that now seem to swirl around the Khairuddin case. Okay,
and I think it's also, you know, optics of it don't look good at all, coming off the back the fact that the Deputy Defence Minister had written a letter of support for his son to be appointed a board member of Farmaniaga. All of that kind of coalescing in this one weekend, and it doesn't look good. And I have to say that, you know, this is not a new issue, though. The idea or the conversations about double standards is not a new conversation in Malaysia. It's one that we've had going on for quite a while.
Yeah, and I think it's become perhaps commonplace to talk about how the rich and the privileged, those connected, those with a father or a mother who's a Tan Sri or Dato', you know, get away, perhaps even literally, with murder. And the idea here is that class in Malaysia really does determine your outcomes. So this is a question of class? I think it's largely a question of class. It's largely a question of your relationship to power. Those, you know, the center of power and those around it use that, you know, that the aura of power to insulate themselves from you know, prosecution or from disciplining powers. So then how do we create a society that is less tolerant of these discrepancies? How do we begin to do that if this is such a long-standing problem? Well, we see this around the world too, right, Melisa? I think in democratic societies, the demand for accountability and consistency is there. Social media, of course, makes it, you know, painfully evident when somebody there's an infraction. Though you know that some you know, long-standing democracies like Britain have had their controversies as well, including I think Dominic Cummings, who was a special advisor to Boris Johnson, caught out for you know, breaking the lockdown, and he didn't pay the price because, and this is what upset a lot of people. But in Malaysia, the question is whether the kind of social pressure we see now applied through social media will result in something like a justice for all those who've had to you know, take it on the chin when it comes to the punishments that have been meted out to them. It's a question of repercussions. I do want to point out, though, that the idea of accountability, right, Sharaad, because, you know, with the case of the minister, the deputy minister, it was about, you know, the Teresa Kok, who pointed out that he had broken quarantine or questioned whether he had observed quarantine. I think that having perhaps a shadow minister or someone to look at that comes, there are some benefits to that. Absolutely, and also, of course, a civil service, perhaps more exposed to the antics and the behaviors and
Correct,
the reality
yes.
of what people in power are like, you know, being able to leak that information out to the general public or to the media and so on and so forth. I don't think the media has been particularly good. And I think this is very interesting for all of us in the media.
The media hasn't been very good?
Well, the media has not been, you know, taking the lead. You know, I think the social media takes the lead.
Yes.
The opposition forces take the lead in doing the exposés.
And the media pick up those
They pick it up because they
comments.
can't afford not to pick it up. When the social media goes wild with these accusations, when the social media points out the actual salary of the people in question and talk about the fine as a function of that salary or percentage of that salary, how can the traditional mainstream media ignore it?
Well, there you go. So conversations on social media trickle into conversations on the media, and then it's amplified into conversations in Dewan Rakyat. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Let's discuss the possibility of a youth-first Malaysian political party. That's coming up in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to consider this.
Pesawat Back Air di Kazakhstan, pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
Notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program.
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro AWANI sekarang.
Bayangkan pagi anda dengan pandangan dan perbincangan luar kota. Berita dan isu semasa yang wajib anda ketahui sebelum anda keluar rumah. Paparan terkini, kupasan mendalam. Kami temani anda di waktu pagi untuk hari yang lebih ceria dan produktif. Gigi Ahmad, Hafizi Azaman, Hakim Rahman, Hafizi Rosli dan Naila Huda. Semuanya di awal.
Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa. Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Former Bersatu Youth Chief Syed Saddiq Abdul Rahman's interview with Channel News Asia has generated headlines on the possibility of a new party that is centered on youth and the group's interests. Now, at this point in time, there is still no clarity on what exactly this entails. Consider This has reached out to Syed Saddiq, but unfortunately he was unable to comment tonight. And despite the lack of details, the conversation still continues about this. So tonight on the show, we have joining us 2 youth NGOs in the studio. We have Qyira Yusri. She's the co-founder of UNDI 18 and one of the organizers of Parliament Digital. Qyira, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us.
So there's been some, so we understand that there's been some kind of discussion with youth-led NGOs, youth leaders coming out, particularly of Parliament Digital, about whether to establish a political party for young people specifically. And I'm wondering whether have these conversations resulted in this youth-led party that Syed Saddiq alluded to?
I think I wouldn't discount that as a factor. I mean, I'm not told by YB Saddiq, of course, and I'm honestly a poor replacement to his presence tonight. But looking at Parliament Digital, you know, the youth joining the program, a number of them were already card-carrying members, you know, from various political parties like PKR, UMNO, even past members were joining the program. And afterward, I was told that, you know, a few of them were inspired and some of them were also approached by political parties to join them as well. And honestly, I think that's a good thing, because I always think that, you know, the political parties in Malaysia, you know, should get more young people in, and hopefully Parliament Digital sort of like shocked them enough to, you know, I want to recruit these young folks in. So,
and so that's an interesting impulse, right? Recruiting the energies that you see now on display from an independent group, but co-optation, it doesn't necessarily good for the group that gets co-opted because they become subservient to the agenda of that main group. But I want to ask you, and I want to say this, you are not a poor substitute for the former minister. Because in fact, the kinds of things that you have initiated have been in UNDI 18, and the lowering of the, you know, the voting age has been very, very powerful in terms of thinking about the future. I want you to help me understand the difference between the kind of work that you do, right? Movement building, the idea of, you know, youth in civil society versus youth and in a political context, in a political organization. Is there a difference? Movement or political party?
Yeah, I think there's a clear difference, and I see it as more along different places in the process for young people's political participation. So the work that we do here in UNDI 18, I would say 80% of the participants that come in is their first time ever being in a political advocacy, either program or campaign. You know, at the moment we're running 6 campaigns concurrently, ranging from women's issues to Borneo issues like Undi Sabah and Undi Sarawak. To many of the young people that apply to join these programs, it is their first time ever running a campaign, first time ever speaking to politicians, first time ever fundraising for the campaign that we want to run with them, because we let them lead it quite independently. So I think it's when it comes to joining political parties or even forming political parties, I would say it's more along for people who already have their political awakening. I think for UNDI 18, our goal is to spark the awakening in as many young people as possible and as early as possible, which is why we always do programs with participants under 18-year-olds.
Okay, all right, Qyira, we're going to have you, we're going to come back to you in just a sec, but right now we have joining us via Skype, Kavita Maheendran. She's an EXCO member of the Malaysian Youth Council, or Majlis Belia Malaysia. Kavita, hi, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us on the show. What do you make of the headlines coming off Syed Saddiq's interview about the possibility of a youth-centric political party?
Good evening, Melisa and Sharaad. Thank you so much for having me on the show. So before that, Qyira and UNDI 18 team, thank you so much for lobbying this proposal. This move has certainly ignited many young people's spirit. So my thought on a youth-centric political party, I would say that the time it is now, more than ever, Malaysians should support and encourage youth-centric political parties. And with the voting age of 18 years old, I see no reason that Malaysian youth or to be more participative in a political party. And also, I think it is also important for any youth who have the interest in joining political party, make sure that they are well equipped, they know the right things, and they have the right knowledge before they step into it.
Kavita, what would be the difference for you of young people choosing to join a political party with their youth wings versus a party that claims to represent youth or represent the aspirations of youth in its main body, right? That is not a wing of an existing party, but it is the main thing. Is there a difference for you?
Definitely it will be a difference, because when it comes to a youth-based political party, they would definitely have like an aligned goal that would actually focuses on matters that involve youth. But in terms of parties that actually representing the youth voices, they also have other matters that they have to consider too. So probably in terms of focusing and also to narrow on matters that relate to youth, it might not be as extensively done, or it wouldn't be so much of emphasis on it.
Okay. Is there anything you're concerned about, Kavita? With the conversations about starting up a youth-led party, are there any areas that you're worried that could be pitfalls if not done correctly, not executed correctly?
I believe if, let's say, if there's less lack of information, understanding, or even grasping the country's law and order, and also understanding the right way to become a politician or to be a country leader, it definitely will affect. So it is very important for each youth to properly understand and not to just join it just for the sake of it or for the fun of it, but they should properly understand it before being a part of it.
What are the things that we have had over the years in terms of political parties is that they're either race-based, in which they champion the race, or they have ideological parties like the Socialist Party that have a strong worldview and have programs that align with that worldview. But what would a youth party be? I mean, this would be the first party based on demographics of your location, right, and for a party that perhaps will lose members as they grow older. Now, how will that kind of party sustain itself, and how would it differentiate itself in ideological terms or in terms of its platform from other parties?
Because I would say it comes down to Asian mentality, because for so many years, we have been telling our children, our youngsters, not to speak against the parents, to speak against elder people. And for so long, we are constrained, we are restricted in many ways. And youth in current age, and I would say in the past 5 years, you can say how youth have emerged and they have been voicing out, and they would definitely have the capability to lead. And with proper, even like many NGOs, right, we also have been training youth to properly lead, or to, when we are organizing a certain program, so they somehow learn the proper leadership skills, and by this we'll be able to trust on youth. Because for so long we have been we have been fighting and struggling to make sure that we have good quality leaders for the country. And I think that's why we were asking for our opportunity to step up and give us a chance.
Okay. What are the conversations being had among youth and, well, you know, Majlis Belia specifically? What are the conversations that you guys are having amongst yourselves when you read about this news?
Perhaps I would say in Malaysian Youth Council, or MYM, our focus is to produce like quality leaders, and we make sure that when they actually step out from this council, will be really good leaders with proper equipping of knowledge in terms of leading, and also to have good knowledge in politics. And from being in part of Youth Council as well, we have been lobbying, we have been meeting ministries, and recently the Prime Minister has announced that to allow a youth to be represented in Dewan Negara. So that was recently announced in the recent youth celebration on 15th of August. So from here, and we are actually supportive of this vision, and we hope that more youth will come and support this party.
But Kavita, we also know the Dewan Negara is not the most dynamic house in our bicameral parliamentary system, and it's often seen as a rubber stamp. You know, it might be great for the individual to be the youth senator. It pays very well. But beyond that, what real impact will a youth representative or youth senator be, or have, rather?
I would say this would be like a first step, because we have not have a youth voice in the Dewan Negara. So this is just like, it's like our first step, and we are actually quite happy that the Prime Minister has agreed to this. Perhaps this will actually open up to many channels and many windows of opportunities for other youths to feel motivated and to be participative as well.
Yeah, Kavita, can I just ask you very quickly, why do you think a youth-led political party will not end up with the same issues that a traditional political party might face?
First of all, I would say that we are quite passionate in terms of empowering certain topics, or also in terms of activism. I've seen many youth leaders that are actually quite active in it and passionate about it. And we have seen the mistakes that have done by the previous leaders, and we are actually quite sick of it. And when we come out that, we definitely wouldn't want to repeat that. And I believe these youth who are coming forward, they wouldn't want to set that kind of example. They definitely want to do something different.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us. What a pleasure it is. Thank you for sharing your time and your insights. We're going to take a quick break, but after this, we'll come back to the co-founder of UNDI 18, Qyira Yusri. Stay tuned to consider this.
Pesawat back air di Kazakhstan, pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
Notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro AWANI sekarang.
Bayangkan pagi anda dengan pandangan dan perbincangan luar kota. Berita dan isu semasa yang wajib anda ketahui sebelum anda keluar rumah. Paparan terkini, kupasan mendalam. Kami temani anda di waktu pagi untuk hari yang lebih ceria dan produktif. Gigi Ahmad, Hafizi Azaman, Hakim Rahman, Hafizi Rosli dan Naila Huda. Semuanya di Awani Pagi.
Stop!
Thanks so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our conversation with Qyira Yusri, co-founder of UNDI 18. Qyira, you know, you've heard the conversation with Kavita a bit earlier, and I'm wondering what you think a youth-led party, a youth-first party, youth-focused party, whatever you want to call it, what would that look like?
I think it would be something very new in the political scene that we have here. But I thought it was very interesting that Kavita pointed out one of the challenges that they face, because I feel that one of the challenges that many people my age don't consider when it comes to running your own thing is the financial issues, right? I mean, I think I read somewhere that, you know, to win an election, an MPC is about, to win, it's about 2 million ringgit, right? And that's taken into not even you know, when young people want to contest, you know, you have to put down a deposit of 10,000. For Adunsi, it's 5,000. All of these numbers and figures are not, you know, you can't just use passion to finance your election campaign. And I think I'd be very curious to see, you know, how they're able to garner, you know, youth support,
financial
support and financial. I mean, if you look at America, people like AOC has successfully funded, you know, raised money through her community to fund her elections. I wonder if that's something that YB Saddiq is considering when it comes to
like
his party.
Crowdfunding, I do think that this other issue, of course, is, and they might be in the Malaysian context, any number of interested parties might come and say, well, let's put down some money, we'll come back. You know, there are, I don't know, any number of developers that will back a number of horses in a single race. But I wonder if young people are aware that the more they get entangled in the reality of politics, the more they're going to have to make compromises, the more, like everybody else does. And, you know, wanting to keep that image of enduring purity, is that something that they can actually hold on to when they become embroiled in the reality of democratic electoral politics?
I think that will go into their political awakening. I think, you know, even someone who works in political advocacy, right? I'm not even in the middle fighting it out with the rest of them. And you can already see how sometimes you have to give and take on certain things when it comes to public issues, national issues, because you need to constantly think about what is the bigger goal that you want to hit? What is the bigger issue at hand here? I think when young people go into politics, we need to remember that it's not just about representation purely, it's more than that.
I think also, you know, what was interesting to me in reading the headlines was also the word multi-ethnic, right? So it wasn't just youth-led, it was also multicultural, multi-ethnic. And I'm wondering whether a multiracial party, which focuses on values that youth say they champion, inclusivity, diversity and all that, would that appeal to a majority of youth? Because youth, they're not monolithic, there's multifaceted.
I think it would, personally, I think it would jive very well with youth in the urban areas because we're quite used to having being exposed to multiracial communities, even in schools and universities and all that. But I'm not sure if this would this same concept would apply to maybe constituencies outside like urban or semi-urban areas. So it'll be very interesting to see if his new party will contest in which area. Right, because even I think his own area is considered a semi-urban area, right, where it's a little bit mix of both. Will he be able to you know, run a grassroots campaign? You know, because you know, elections all about machinery, and political parties have been doing it for many years. So would a new party be able to top that?
Right, and you know, we take this away from the question of Syed Saddiq, his personality, his former associations with Bersatu, and now his decision to distance himself from Pejuang. You know, the question of anybody or any group of young people setting up a youth party. And what would the structure of it be? Because there seems to be a nuance here between a youth party, maybe a party of young people, and a youth-led party, which means a party that tries to attract as broad a base as possible, which you would need to win an election, right? And so what for you, where's it for? What exactly is that nuance, and why would one work better than the other?
I think the second option is a lot more feasible, considering the context that we are in Malaysia, because you know, you're not going to have a voter base where the constituency is 100% young people. That's just purely impossible. So I think it's wise to have a youth-led party, because then you can show that young people actually have what it takes to lead political parties, which currently in existing political parties you are just confined to youth wings. Similar to other majlis like women, you're just confined to women wings, right? When I hope that, you know, if this launches, then you can see it can reinvigorate but other political parties to consider whether these wings are still needed.
That comes to a very important point. Have traditional parties failed to allow young people to lead? When we look at some of the young leaders around the world, like Jacinda Ardern came through a traditional party. She came to the, to the Labour Party. Emmanuel Macron, I mean Justin Trudeau. I believe they came through the traditional parties where young people and succession allowed for that renewal. What is not happening in our political parties today?
I think it's the political culture here where, well, first of all, we have a very high retirement age, right? So I guess... especially in politics where there's no retirement age, right? So I think that makes it very difficult for young people to be given the opportunities. Political parties need to consider, when you have a youth wing, that's perfectly fine to me, but what are you actually doing to build up the young people within your party? Are they in our mentoring programs? Do you, expose the young people in your party beyond just doing the press statements or bringing them to meetings? Are they actually doing something where they can build their capacity to become political leaders, which would help them win elections later?
I'm also wondering on that same vein whether creating a political party is inevitable, coming out from the push for more political engagement, lowering the voting age. Is it inevitable that there is a youth-led political party?
That's a very interesting question. I think actually, we wouldn't have that if we didn't have young representative in the first place. So, I mean, having someone like Syed Saddiq who became an MP and then a minister, I think that sparked a lot of ideas with young people, and then and then lowering the voting age. Suddenly, everything seems possible. And sometimes for people our age, it's like, even if you fail, right, what is there to lose right now?
Yeah. Do you agree, Qyira, with what we heard Kavita say about, when I asked her, how would a youth-led party avoid the pitfalls of the traditional political parties? How, like Sharaad said, the enduring purity. Do you agree with that the passion will save them, the idealism will save them?
I think as someone who has worked in this field for almost 4 years now, I think passion alone is not sustainable. So I agree, yes and no. Passion is great to fuel the work that you want to do, but it alone is not sustainable. You still need to consider, again, the bigger picture. What do you actually want to achieve? When you start a new party, do you want to belong to a coalition that represents your values? Do you want to, what kind of voice do you want to represent in parliament? If just having 1 or 2 voices, is that actually enough to turn the tide? Maybe in this government it's enough to turn the tide, but realistically, we look over the years, is that enough? So I think these are the questions that we need to consider when it comes to starting a movement or a party.
I wonder very quickly if you could speak to the fact that we've had young leaders who have they're great demagogues. They say all the right things, and then when they get positions, they're in power, they do very different things, and often very self-serving things. What is in the structure of our politics, do you think, that allows politicians not to be accountable to the very base that put them in power?
So I think it's all. I mean, in a democracy, you're also allowed to change sides or change your principles and things like that. But I think what we lack here in Malaysia is the lack of a mechanism for the people to hold the politicians accountable. So could we launch a petition to have a recall election? For example, if we decide that there's enough people in this area that don't like my MP, can I gather enough signatures and then let's run a PRK? Right. I don't think that has happened in Malaysia, but that would be something interesting, right? Then this way, politicians can be reminded that you can't just go back on the promises that you've made to your people, because at this point promises and manifestos probably don't hold as much weight anymore because of what happened recently. So I think for Malaysians, for the average citizens like us, what do we have to hold on to?
So how to hold politicians accountable. Qyira, thank you so much for joining us. What a pleasure, as always, to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. Now I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching. Consider this. Good night, folks.